Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, Chewy. How are you, my friend?
Good, mate. What's cracking?
What's crack-a-lacking? I don't know, stuff, things. I'm clear of COVID. When I say I'm clear, I didn't have it, but I had my day 7 test yesterday because we were in contact with it, and it was clear as well. So yes, today I get to go to the supermarket. Whee!
I have been ducking that shit like a ninja. I went to a stag do a couple of weeks ago, and a couple of the people there got it. Texted me over the space of the next week saying, "Hey man, you might want to check yourself
before you wreck yourself."
Yeah, using those rats and going, I hope I don't have it. And yep, don't have it.
I have found, because the new rules as well, because if you're at a party with someone, you're not a close contact because you've got to be living with them, eh? Yeah. So you've been able, so you've got keeping an eye on yourself, but continuing on with life sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm just real, the sort of job that I do in retail and that sort of thing. I'm dealing with a lot of older or vulnerable people, and I just don't want to take it to work, basically.
Yeah. I get you. I'm feeling you. We had it come into the house, but I have to say this: I've been fairly vocal about my support for things like restrictions on people and the way to keep COVID out of the community. Obviously with Omicron, I don't know, I was gonna say it hasn't worked very well, but maybe we'd have 1 million cases if everything had been open, perhaps. I don't know. But I gotta say, I'm again follow the science, did what was supposed to be done when it's in your house, and no one in the house got it. So pretty happy about that.
Chalk that up as a win.
Yeah, pretty happy. I mean, like the person who had it then left the house, which was helpful. But they went to a different house. But the infectious periods, we were still exposed. And even if they had have stayed in the house, we'd set up the downstairs part of the house to be completely isolated, so we wouldn't have been in contact with them anyway. So pretty happy overall. Although, we're going to talk about this. Let's just say we should probably say good morning to George first. George, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
The brains and the looks behind the operation. George has been laughing because I've been reading an article about a Christian school in Australia who has decided to make teachers sign a contract promising they're not going to be gay at any stage, promising they're not going to choose to be gay for a day. As I exaggerate, and I was being a little bit deriding of said school and the comments that came out of it, and I think I've been entertaining George. Would that be fair, George? Have you had a fun last 5 or 7 minutes?
Yeah, it's been good.
I mean, there's already a couple of red flags there: Australian and Christian school. So I look forward to finding out about that.
We'll have a look at that later on. But look, we are talking a bit about COVID. George, how are you feeling, George? I mean, the world wants to know. You were talking yesterday about being a bit under the weather. Everything okay today?
It feels about the same today. But yeah, I did a rat test yesterday. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and it was negative. But I shoved it right up there and moved it around, and
that's what she said.
Touched the brain, and yeah. So I
discovered that I think my left sinus is a lot bigger than my right because I'm struggling to get it in the right side, but the left side is like whoop, like one of those fucking slide whistles, mate. It goes in and out.
You just got to remember, unless you're losing childhood memories, you're doing it wrong.
Honestly, I do sound like a slide whistle because I go like this. So yeah, hey George, thanks for your work so far, mate. Well, you jump in and out whenever you like. You're welcome to join in. We've got some interesting conversations going on and coming up today. We're going to be talking a bit about Omicron now, but what I wanted to do as well, we were supposed to have an announcement yesterday from the Prime Minister about what was happening with the mandates. That didn't happen, although it's been signaled it will be happening tomorrow. I thought we haven't done this at all during this, this new run of the show, is actually talk business and talk to business about what the mandates have done, what they mean, and what they mean to be restricted. That'll be coming up this hour. Oh, actually, this is coming up. We're going to start. We're going to do that first. We're also going to have a look at that school, and also a really cool story out of Australia about basically a family in or near the Blue Mountains, giving the fingers to local developers. It's a bit weird, to be honest, but it's a pretty cool story as well. So we'll have a look at that towards the second half of the hour as well. Let us have a wee look at this. We approached a couple of epidemiologists to come on. We couldn't get anyone to come on, but what we can do is reflect what some of them have said in the media in the last 24 hours. Rod Jackson, who is from the University of Auckland, he says that the clamour to ditch vaccine passes and change the traffic light setting is poorly timed. And one of the reasons it's poorly timed, and I believe it was also Michael Baker who said, half of the people that are going to get COVID haven't got it yet. Meaning we're all kind of going, oh, the numbers are coming down. Oh, it all seems okay now. Oh, we must be coming towards the end of this. Oh, there's so many cases. We might as well open up the country. But the epidemiologists are actually saying, yeah, I don't know if that's such a shit hot idea right now. And it's still here. It's still around. And now is not. Basically, they're saying, epidemiologists are saying, it would appear in one voice, now is not the time to relax up on public health measures. Chewy.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I mean, we've seen the numbers, we've seen the hospitalizations. It's obviously out in the community. It doesn't seem to be the right time at all. So yeah, I do have some anxiety about whatever they're going to announce on Wednesday. There's been a lot from, say, the hospitality area going, look, these restrictions are really killing our business. But I think they're ignoring the fact that people are being cautious. They're not necessarily in a rush to go out to a restaurant, especially if there's going to be a relaxation of requirements.
Because the other thing is that at one point at the start of Omicron, 6% of the unvaccinated, which is now I think more like 3% of the unvaccinated, were causing 45% of the cases. So if all the mandates come off and if we move into that area, are the malls and shops and restaurants going to be flooded with unvaccinated people, which will see another spike? I guess what these epidemiologists are saying is, so this is University of Auckland epidemiologist Professor Rod Jackson is saying the worst may yet be to come. He says, quote, it's too time to relax, end quote, although the country is nearing its peak. So if we're not at our peak now, what do we do when it comes to it? I mean, I could be wrong on this. I'm not the expert here, but I feel like we have spent a lot of 2 years basically, and because we don't know what's going to happen, I can't say that we are definitely going to stumble at the final hurdle, but it feels to me like on some levels this hopefully is the final hurdle. Once Omicron goes through, a ton of people will have had it, will have, antibodies for the next 3 to 6 months. And what happens next is I would hate for it to see this Omicron surge continue on because we've literally opened up a couple of weeks too early. And that's what I'm talking about, a couple of weeks too early. The article you're seeing beside you is an Ardunity PM under fire over big vax pass mandates announcement delay. Sorry, I heard you breathing there, Chewy. You got something to jump in before I read a couple of things from this article?
I mean, PM under fire and a big vax pass mandate announcement delay. It's a day. People need to chill.
Well, also, when they say the PM under fire, the under fire in the article is David Seymour and is the National Party spokesperson for COVID. So that's the.
I'll say no more.
Yeah,
say no more.
But it's fair that we at least put that out there and put out what they're saying. So in this article, I'll read it from up here though. ACT's leader David Seymour says the delay showed government cared less about the public who have been affected by the restrictions and more about podium time. It's no longer an eternity; it's an Ardunity, said David Seymour.
I hate it.
I know you've got to give it to him. He's got his thing. Look, you know what? I actually don't necessarily think the first part of that sentence is wrong. The government cares less about the public who have been affected by the restrictions, perhaps, but they care more about the public the majority of people they're trying to keep safe. No, so maybe the first part of that sentence is correct. Chris Bishop, who is the national COVID-19 spokesman, said if the evidence was there to remove the mandates and vaccine passes, it should be announced as soon as possible. People are sick of announcements after announcements. The whole justification is to protect the health system. If the data shows there is no risk anymore, then they need to get rid of them as soon as possible. However, experts say any changes should only come after cases and hospitalizations have plateaued, which was likely in a few weeks. So we've got the experts saying maybe now is not the time. When I say experts, epidemiologists, the people who know the stuff. We've got the opposition MPs saying time to get it off. And coming up shortly, we'll have a chat with Alan McDonald to see what the businesses have got to say about this as well. A blog post by Otago University experts Professor Nick Wilson, Dr. Jennifer Summers, and Professor Michael Baker said, while the case numbers had likely peaked, caution was needed in relaxing restrictions to avoid further waves, as have been seen in Australia.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, look at what others have seen overseas. Is like, oh, cool, we've got to the peak. We've got this now. We'll loosen restrictions. You get a spike. Then the government has to come back and go, well, actually, we're putting restrictions back on. I know it's confusing. Flip, flop, flip, flop. The public don't know where they stand.
Yep.
And then we get another spike and you lose trust, I guess. I would much rather them go, hey, look, we kept vaccine passes going for maybe a month or so too long. But we thought it was the right call. Then oh shit, what do we do now? Because I mean, as you found, once you take the lid off, the lid's off. You can't get back on.
You can't put the toothpaste back in the toothpaste thingy. The other thing that Chris Bishop said and intimated said, if it was about protecting the health system, my understanding is our ICU beds and stuff are a maximum right now, pretty much.
Yep.
So therefore, it feels like maybe we do need to protect it a bit more. I'm not sure. And just to finish off this bit before we bring Alan McDonald on, the reason and I'll always say the reason the Prime Minister has said, because whether this is accurate or not, nobody knows, but the Prime Minister has said the reason that they're going to wait 48 hours, so Wednesday instead of Monday, to make this announcement, which they've done, is they want to do a bit of further work on it. They want to finalize the advice and consider any knock-on effects. She said the changes were not immediate and the extra 48 hours will not make any difference to whether the decision took effect. So the Prime Minister has come out saying, we're pretty sure on this, but we feel like we need a couple more days just to be 100% sure on the advice. I guess forget it's politics and the Prime Minister, because people will always say, oh, that's where you vote, so that's where you're going to support. I think person A needing expert advice to make decision B and says, we don't have all the advice yet, just give us a couple of days, seems reasonable. Now,
yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
But if she is playing
really good.
If she is playing pure politics, fair enough for criticism, but putting it like that, like they need a couple more days just to finalize some things. I mean, what the opposite of that would be making a decision too quickly and having that too quickly decision be detrimental to everybody. So, if you do the equal and opposite, you don't want that either, do you?
We've come up with a new COVID framework, and it's just basically we're going to wing it and see what happens. I'm not keen on that.
All right, let's bring in a guest for today. He's the head of advocacy and strategy at the Employers and Manufacturers Association. It's Alan McDonald. Alan joins us. Good morning, sir.
Morning. How are you guys?
Doing
Morning,
very
Alan.
well. Thank you for giving us a few minutes to have a chat. I guess primarily about the the effect of the mandates and stuff on the business side of things.
Yep.
How does a business? I mean, obviously we know some businesses are struggling. I mean, I run a business it's had impacted by mandates and by COVID in general. But how do we balance what the health professionals are saying, which seems to be unanimously now is not the time to take mandates off, versus what I'm assuming most businesses are saying, which is, we want all of our customers back, not just 96% of them which are vaccinated.
Yeah, and the issue that you've got there, Pat and Chewy, is that 96% of customers aren't back yet. because there's very much a self-imposed lockdown. If you walk through just about any main street anywhere, it's tumbleweeds running down through them. And I happen to have been traveling around a little bit lately, and Wellington, Tauranga, Hamilton, Auckland. It's not that long ago I was down south, and Queenstown was like a ghost town. So it's a self-imposed lockdown. And so I think the main thing that needs to change is the language around it, because there's still quite a lot of fear in the community. And at some point, we very, very soon, I think too, we have to get used to the idea of actually living with this and trying to be as normal as possible while taking all the precautions. And I've been listening to you talk in the last couple of minutes. The mandates worked really well for business, particularly when we had the Delta variant, because it was quite more harmful, I think, than the current one. And so it gave businesses a lot of certainty in managing things in their workplace, and particularly from a health and safety point of view. But I think with Omicron sort of having overrun and bypassed everything, people in the business community aren't spreading, to a limited degree, aren't spreading Omicron. It seems to be coming more out of the schools and the communities. And, I know in our own workplace, we've got multiple people off because they've got kids at school or had kids at school that have now got Omicron. So in many ways, from the business point of view, mandates are kind of past the purpose of what they were originally brought in for. But that's not to say they haven't served a very useful purpose in managing particularly the Delta variant, but also slowing the spread of Omicron initially while we caught up on vaccines and got the rat tests in place.
You talked about a self-imposed lockdown. So that also therefore means that mandates restricted, and look, I agree with you. I mean, I'm not going to restaurants or cafes and stuff at the moment by choice because of Omicron being out there. But that therefore means the mandates are irrelevant, because if it's self-imposed, that's not going to change the day. It's like, oh, mandates are off. That because all people like me will be thinking is now that cafe is going to be full of unvaccinated people, which increases the risk of passing on COVID. So that's taking those off, the mandates off, is not going to therefore help if if we are self-imposing our restriction on going into businesses, is it?
No, and that's why I suggested that the language around this has to change, whether it's from government departments, our leaders, or just in the general community, because, in Auckland anyway, where I'm based, it looks like we're through the worst of it. And I think too, if, your point about surges and things elsewhere around when they've taken off some of the restrictions, we're much more highly vaccinated than many of those comparable countries.
Yeah.
I think there's only one or two that might be more vaccinated than we are. So, as I said earlier, at some point we've got to try and come to the realization that we're going to have to live with this. And one of the more encouraging things I've heard lately in discussions with ministers and others is that in the future they will leave the management of future waves or future outbreaks to the business community. So it's something we've been asking for the last 18 months or so, is just give us what the restrictions are and let us manage them, rather than have things like, MB picking winners and losers on who can and can't open and those sort of things. Our view has always been, if you meet the restrictions, you should be able to open. And that hasn't always been the case. And that would lower the economic impact. But as I also said, there's still quite a lot of worry and concern in the community. So, you have to take them with you, and business is probably a bit ahead of the rest of the community, and having managed this so well for so long, and seeing the impacts within their own businesses as opposed to what the fear factor might be in the community or the concern factor.
I'm interested. One more thing. Sorry, Chewy. I know I've had two questions in a row. You can jump in next, mate. But I'm interested in a couple of things, Alan. You say the messaging should be changed. I guess I'd like to know from you to what. And as a citizen who uses businesses, respectfully to business owners, I don't want to take advice from business owners on how to manage an Omicron surge. I want to take advice from epidemiologists and public health sector experts, because I'm not saying this is all businesses. I mean, I am a business owner, but we all know that if you're short of your monthly quota, your monthly income, you need to earn more money. Like a lot of them will have to do because of these restrictions. Many, not all, I'll even say some, might even say many, will push boundaries on those if we left it up to the businesses to self-monitor themselves. I mean, I'd rather take advice from an expert in virology than from my local dairy owner on what they're going to do if there was another surge, and the messaging. I'd happily have you contribute to those 2 points.
Sure, I'll deal with this the management of it first. So I'm not suggesting that business would make up their own rules. What you do is you work within the restrictions that you're given, and then apply them to your own business. Now, that's kind of where we've got to now, and that's because Omicron's forced it on you. So it's saying these are the sets of rules, work within them, rather than what we've seen in the past is only these businesses in this sector can open. Whereas many businesses could easily quite comfortably have opened under the very strict restrictions we saw at the old level 3 and 4 and those sorts of things, or at red. They just haven't been allowed to, because the government has sort of managed this and managed it well. Don't get me wrong, but they could have there could have been a pathway that said, again, these are the rules, meet them and you can open. But what we've seen is picking, for want of a better term, winners and losers.
Yeah.
For example, in the construction sector, I'll just give you an example. So some parts of the construction sector could work, like timber framers, all that sort of thing. But to actually complete a house, you need windows and doors. But windows and door manufacturers were deemed non-essential for completing houses and building projects. So how does that work? And they could have opened under the same restrictions as the others.
Chewy?
I just want to acknowledge there that usually I massively roll my eyes when I hear someone from the business community, or say specifically lately the hospitality sector, going on that they want a loosening of restrictions. I just want to say your points make complete sense to me. And I think we are at a point where we do have such a high percentage of vaccinated people. The people that are very anti-vax, anti-mandate, we know that that's a tiny proportion of people. And I mean, I was even commenting to one of my colleagues the other day that some of the restrictions that are still around seem kind of laughable. I saw a sign on a business locally that had, the number restriction for how many people were allowed on their site. And it was something like 140 people in a Kathmandu or a Macpac type shop. And I don't think I've ever seen 138 people in there. Whereas another retailer across the road with a much higher square footage had one that said 75. It didn't make a lot of sense. So I think hopefully what we're going to see on Wednesday is almost a clearinghouse of what do we need, what doesn't work, what isn't appropriate. But yeah, your example from the building sector, I hadn't come across that, and that does seem ridiculous.
We are seeing those examples everywhere, though, aren't we? I mean, people are talking about having to wear a mask walking into a restaurant, and then when you sit down to eat, you take the mask off. It's still sort of, if you're infectious, you're still sort of infectious. I'm interested. This is what I think is going to happen. Then you jump back in, Alan. Is what will happen is the Prime Minister will announce on Wednesday the mandates are coming off in about a month. And then what that will basically mean is they'll be through the surge anyway, that like the Omicron wave will hopefully be tailing off. And then that will be the end of it. Alan, is it going to make any difference to businesses having the mandates come off? Will businesses see significant increase? Will those that are struggling miraculously not be struggling?
It'll be a slow rebuild, I think, is the answer to that, Pat. I think the restrictions will probably come off by mid-April, and that will coincide with the opening of the borders.
That's about 3 weeks.
Probably time for Easter.
Right.
I think if the red light system or the red light doesn't change to orange or green, I think what you'll see is that they'll lift the number of people allowed to congregate in one place. It might go to 150, it might go to 2, something like that, which would basically catch all the major restaurants and bars right around the country. Some of them will have much larger capacity, but that would, for that particular sector, just an easing there would be quite helpful. I think the mandates coming off just make a difference in some sectors where we know they're struggling. For example, we've got early childhood education providers who are having to stand down large numbers of staff simply because of they won't have a booster yet. And some of them have actually had COVID, and then they've been told by their doctor they have to wait 90 days to get their booster. But in the meantime, the time frame for getting fully vaccinated to work in the sector has expired, and they're following medical advice, but it shuts them out of their situation at work. So that will help ease some of the pressures that I know are in the education sector, for example, and you've seen the police and the other case go through as well. So it won't be a flood. It's going to be quite hard work, I think, for many sectors to rebuild what they've lost over the last couple of years. And it's not just the tourism and hospo sectors that are really struggling. There are a number of others as well. So it'll be a long, slow rebuild. And that's why we want to see the language, to the earlier point, we want to see the language change to say, hey, look, if you're taking the precautions and you're vaccinated, then it's time to return to life as normal as we can make it under the circumstances that we're still going to be working under. And don't forget, there's always the prospect of yet another wave of a different variant coming through as well.
Yeah, I just want one quick point, because I want clarification, because you just talked about early childhood sectors and people being stood down because they didn't have boosters. That wasn't the mandate. Yeah. The mandate was if you're not fully vaccinated, which is that was December of last year. Nothing. I googled it as you were talking, because I was like, have I missed something? No,
there was some delays between people getting their first and second shots. Sorry, not the boosters. I was just mixing
right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was we were clear on that. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Hey, Alan, thank you for joining us. You're from the Employers and Manufacturers Association, Head of Advocacy and Strategy. Really appreciate your time. And appreciate getting your input on that. And, we'll have you back. It was good. It was a good chat. Okay. We appreciate that, mate.
All right. No worries.
Thanks, Alan.
As Alan McDonald. Just as we've been going, remember, if you are watching with us, you're more than welcome to jump in and share. We are live. And for evidence of that, it's 28 past 11 here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Here in Dunedin, it's 1972, but that's because of the time.
Pat, Jack, what are you doing? What are you doing getting someone on making good points? I was ready for war.
I don't know. I mean, I still kind of think that idea of ultimately, if I have to err on the side of advice, I will err with the epidemiologists over the business sector. But I get it, man. I mean, I get it, and I can see that there's it's a little bit like I was talking to someone the other day about government agencies like WINS or that kind of thing. You do get people who slip through the cracks, and that's because when a government agency or any big body makes a rule or makes a some kind of a way of doing something, they have to provide for the 96% of people who fit into that area. Right. And that means there are some people, or in this case, some businesses or whatever, that do slip through the gaps, as they say. But if they did it any other way, everything that any big organization, big government agency, big, mandate for decisions that got made would have to have 100 different conditions to it for every sector of those 100% of people, and would never operate and would cost 100 times as much. And I get that means there's some terrible things that happen and people slip through the gaps and events slip through the gaps, but that's the reality of having a big organization. You got to do what's best and I'm pulling this number out my ass, but for the 96%, and then trying to acknowledge how those 4% fall through. So when I say I would rather err on the side of epidemiologists, I acknowledge that there are those 4%, 10%, 15% of decisions that seem to be a weird one, like the restaurant one, walking in with your mask and then taking it off to eat. But then
that's because COVID comes in at standing height, and when you're sitting down eating, you're ducking it.
What if you're sitting at a bar though? Then you're
well, that depends on the size of the height of the seat. So maybe government should bring in some restrictions on that. I saw it in a meme. It's legit.
Jack says, I still see busy restaurants and bars here in Auckland. Gareth says, human nature, if someone has a meeting, as soon as they walk out, we want to know what the result is, not in a couple of days. Should have had a presser yesterday and waited till they were ready. Well, maybe, but they said that they were going to give an update, and they gave an update, and the update was we'll have to wait for a couple of days to give you a final decision. But I get how the frustration's there. Don't get me wrong. Tom says, hi. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
What else have we got? Nathan says, when will natural immunity be talked about? Seems everyone is dancing around it. Do they not want to diminish the role vaccines have and need to play? Do they not want to diminish the roles? Well, I don't think natural immunity's got anything to do with any of this conversation, because if some people do have natural immunity, the number is so insignificantly small. You don't make legislative changes or public health decisions based on 1/10 of 1% of people that have natural immunity to COVID. It's and if you're talking about here's another meme that we hear going around that I'd like to address now. People are like, oh, I just can't wait to get COVID and then I'll have natural immunity. No, you'll have antibodies for 3 to 6 months. If you get through it and you're fine and you don't have any of the serious side effects, you'll have antibodies for 3 to 6 months, and then at 6 months you can get it again. So let's make sure this is really clear. This is not, if you get COVID, you don't have immunity. You have antibodies which will fight off COVID for 3 to 6 months. If you're older, there's some research talking about those over 75. Those antibodies exit your body. I don't know, that's a horrible thought about however they leave, but even quicker than that. So people who are thinking, and I'm not sure if that's what Nathan's talking about with natural immunity, but people are thinking, oh, let's just get this over and done with and get COVID and then I'll be immune. No, then you'll have antibodies. But another way you can get antibodies, Chewy? There's another one.
That vaccine thing.
Yeah, that vaccine thing.
Yeah,
so,
and I mean that's the thing. Like when I hear people talk about natural immunity, as if like getting a vaccine is unnatural immunity. A vaccine is all about training your immune system to fight something. It's like holding up a picture of like, this is the guy that you want to get. There, in effect, with a vaccine, there isn't a difference between a vaccinated immunity and a natural immunity. It's your body learning.
So basically people are complaining that we may have to get boosters for the vaccine every 6 to 12 months. Well, it's actually no different from catching COVID every 6 to 12 months and then having 6 to 12 months of antibodies. So you can either catch it, take the risk of getting really sick or worse, or you could get a vaccine.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had a vaccine.
I've had a flu vaccine yearly for the past 4 years and haven't caught the flu. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's probably my expectation of where we'll end up with COVID stuff, is it will get rolled into a flu vaccine, a yearly flu vaccine. We just like it's because it's so infectious and it's because it's mutating so much that we're not there yet. It just needs to settle down.
I'm interested in this comment from Crazy. Crazy says Pfizer is working on pushing a 4th jab, trying to make it last for a year. So who is trying to treat it like a flu? I don't know who. I don't know whether she's saying who is, or the WHO. So is it the WHO is trying to treat it like a flu, or is Crazy you asking who is? Because if they're trying to get a 4th jab and has it last a year, that means it sounds like they are trying to treat it like. So they are trying to treat it. In other words, in a medical sense, to treat the ailment like a flu, like you're just saying, rolling it in. So I'm sorry, Crazy, if we didn't quite get the gist of that, but there is your message out for all the smart people to read, not the dumb people like me to read. Now, yesterday, Chewy, you weren't with us, but we talked about Mr. Winston Peters, but going on to the Today FM. And
yes.
We played the little clip of him hanging up on Tova in the morning. And I actually noticed it was, oh gosh, his name's jumped out of my Paul Henry is the corporate voice for that station. I noticed it the other day, which I think is a bit of a fall from grace for him. But we asked the question at the end of it, George and I, we asked the end of the question of it. Tova actually said, now I know you said to my producer you didn't want to talk about Tauranga, but why is that? Within minutes of him hanging up, I just wanted to, there's a couple of layers why I want to actually put this out there. The first is we just spoke to the guys from the EMA and we told them a couple of other topics we want to talk about. One was Fonterra pulling out of Russia, and other was this Christian school in Australia, which is a private institution, thus a business, discriminating. And they said, we don't really have opinions on those. We don't really want to talk about those. So we didn't include it in our conversation. One of the conversations George and I had yesterday was, what about if you've asked not to talk about something and you talk about it, is that a journalistic issue? But it seems that actually we were wrong, because it wasn't Winston who asked not to talk about it. This was put out by Winston Peters yesterday. This is a screenshot of the producer assuring me no question will be asked by Tova O'Brien about the Tauranga by-election. I wonder why Kiwis don't trust the media when they blatantly lie and throw their principles under the bus for a cheap shot. It wasn't a cheap shot. He's being overly precious about that. It's a completely valid and normal question. But if this is the producer saying she won't ask any questions about the election in Tauranga, and then she did, I'm like, way to burn a bridge, and way to. It's not even burn a bridge, because I don't think you need to treat guests like gold if there's a reason to go after them. But if you've overtly said we won't be asking you about that, and then you ask them about it, I have a problem. In fact, George, we're going to bring you back in now, because George is a journalist tutor at University of Otago. I'm like, George, now we have the answer. I think I was going to say malpractice. That sounds a little bit too heavy-handed, but journalistically, that's a poor decision that was made on that show. What do you think, George?
Yeah. I mean, it's a calculation that you make, right? That Tova and her producers have made, that they feel like, and I might have mentioned this yesterday, but they do feel like it's almost it's Winston almost relies on these sorts of interactions with the media, right? It's part of his sort of character, and I feel like it's almost like he wanted to be asked about Tauranga, right? That I feel like that is part of the sort of symbiotic nature that politicians and the media have.
Maybe
is that they have these sorts of dust-ups with each other, but yeah. I mean, Tova got around it, sort of, well, tried to anyway, trying to, say, oh, we simply asked you why you didn't want to get, but I mean, that's a bit cheeky.
I mean, like, look, I get it. I think yesterday we were saying as well, if a guest, especially a profile guest, brings up a thing not to talk about, you kind of are almost bound that you need to talk about it. But I just think if it's a condition for coming on, which it appears to be, then I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm thinking about it from both an interviewer and interviewee, which I've been both of for a long time. That it's not cool. It's not good journalistic practice. I'll just put it that way. Joey, got any thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think it's a win for both of them. Tova, this was her first show, wasn't it? Yeah, what a great one to have of just cool. I'm going to stick it to Winston, and what a great example for Winston, where he goes, see, the media, what I've always been saying, I hung up on them. I am still tough, Winston. I think for a guy who's been the MP for Tauranga for as long as he has, and for there to be a obvious upcoming by-election for that seat, why would you not want to talk about it? It's like, I'm going to put this rule in place, and I know it's going to be broken. I know what's going to happen here. Winston's been a political operator for as long as I've been alive. He knows what he's doing.
I think you're both right. I think, though, from a production side of things, if you have a guest that says, "Oh, come on, but I'm not talking about this," and you want to talk about that, it's actually on you to then say, "Well, we're not going to have you on because we want to talk to you."
I think me personally,
we've had that in this show. We've had that in this show where we wanted to talk to people about specific things, and they've said no, so we've said, "All right, well, we're not going to talk about other stuff. That's what we want to talk about." And I don't know. I'm not trying to be like the defender of Winston here, but I guess I'm just looking at it from a journalistic practice sort of.
I think I do agree with you there. Like, I mean, I think from the space of like entertainment reviews, interviews, and that sort of thing, I don't want to talk about my recent divorce or something like that, and someone brings it up as a gotcha. That's always struck me the wrong way. And then if you flip it here, where it's in the political sphere of an MP or a politician saying, I don't want to talk about this, and the interviewer pushing through that because it's in the public interest more than someone's divorce is, I guess. But yeah, it is a double standard.
there probably is a limit though as well, because I agree with you about the divorce thing. But I also am of the opinion and of the belief that, like, I was working at ZB when various marriages broke up. Simon Dallow broke up, Mike Hosking broke up, and those people in particular had put their marriages in front of the public eye. Like, they'd sold the women's days rights to their marriages. They'd done all those things. They'd had photos with their kids, so they'd chosen to put it in there. So I, for me personally, I've got no problem with the media talking about it. However, if one of the person says, "I'm happy to come on your show, but I'm not going to talk about my divorce," and if you do, then that's where I'm not saying people can't talk about it. I'm like, this is the reason we're bringing you on, is to have this conversation. I don't want to have that conversation. Okay, we can't have you on that. I don't want to have that conversation. Oh, that's fine. We won't talk about it. Then we'll bring you on, and then you talk about it. I just think it's poor practice. I think
that's fair.
But everyone's right here. It's like, it was a good headline. Winston's back in the media. We're still talking about him the next day. Obviously.
Yeah, I don't think there's any losers.
Yeah,
in this at all.
But I was also going to say, like, I talked to James Shaw about the Taiwan situation, and I was trying to get James Shaw to acknowledge whether Taiwan was a country, an independent state, or did it belong to China, and he wouldn't answer it. But I pressed him, because there's a different situation. If you're not answering it, like talking to the NBA about, human rights violations in China, and they say, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that." There's a difference there, because it's actually a newsworthy story to talk about. So maybe that's where I'm talking against my own argument for Winston. Him and Tauranga is maybe a newsworthy story warranting of pushing. So I guess I'm saying, if I ask someone on and they say, "I'm not going to talk about this, I won't do it," I'll either just choose not to have them on or not talk about it. But I can actually see, now that I've gone full fucking circle, why one would on a significant news story as well. All right. Speaking of significant news stories, here's one as well. We've got a couple of shorties coming up here, Chewy, and not shorties as in yo shorty, but like short. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know where that came from. Short news stories. This came out yesterday, actually, that Fonterra is exiting Russian businesses. This is still happening all over the world, that corporations and companies are pulling out of Russia. We're hearing people like Tucker Carlson supporting Russia and saying that the economic sanctions, he doesn't support them and he sides with Russia. But it seems the rest of the world, and it seems from what's happening in Russia, the economic sanctions seem to be working to harm Russia, which is the perpetrator of war crimes right now, if we remember. Just putting that out there in case Tucker sees this, is the country that he's supporting, the perpetrator of the war crimes. But yeah, our biggest company, and I have this feeling that Fonterra might be the biggest dairy producer in the world, or dairy company in the world. But anyway, certainly our biggest company pulling out of Russia. I guess the difficult thing with business is you have shareholders, and in the law, you must not do things that negatively impact your shareholders. In other words, you're not allowed to make decisions that might cause the stock price to go down. It's illegal to do so, right? So this is interesting that big businesses like this, that are stock market businesses, are doing it, because it's sort of it'll impact their sales, it'll impact their bottom line, it'll impact their share price, I guess, and therefore, but they're doing it anyway because of the war.
Well, I think that shows that they've gone, how much money is our Russian market worth, versus the rest of the world seeing our products on a list of this company is still exporting to Russia or still working with Russia. I think that's an often overlooked thing when you're talking about, they can't tank their share price. All of these companies that have pulled out of Russia, they're not necessarily doing it for altruistic reasons. It is a business decision. And they've gone, well, the Western world is worth more than Russia's economy to us at the moment. I think more worrying for Russia is, I read, I'll have to try and find the article, but one of the big purchasers of Russian gas is Germany, and they tanked a development that they were doing with Russia over this, and they're now signing an agreement with, I believe, Turkey, to supply gas. If Germany doesn't need Russian gas anymore, that's a long-term problem for Russia.
Yeah. I read an article the other day, and I don't know, I haven't got it either, about some of the oligarchs. The whole time we've been talking about this, it's been once the oligarchs have their $1 trillion, their bottom line be hit pretty hard, then perhaps that's when you'll see some internal fighting to get rid of Russia. And I saw someone put a bounty on Putin's head of $1 million US or something like that. I don't know. I'll say allegedly because I read it and didn't go too deep into it. I thought, because I just mentioned the stock price, the decision was made. It's really made no difference to their stocks. $3 on Monday, dropped to $2.98.
Because Russia's not a huge market
was at $2.98. So it hasn't actually impacted their bottom line at the moment. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit sad to think that maybe it's only about the bottom dollar, but you're right. It's why pretty much most businesses make any decision, which is based around, am I going to get more sales than I lose for making this decision? And perhaps that's all they decide on.
Yep.
Bunch of people joining us and joining online. Thanks for you guys joining in. We'll get to your comments when we can get to your comments. We don't always get to all of them, of course, unless you super chat us. When you super chat us, unless it's like a something that might break libel laws, we kind of feel a bit more encouraged for a super chat. We sort of feel obliged, as long as it's not breaking any rules, for a super chat. Let's have a look at a couple of other stories, quickly. We talked about this at the start of this morning's show. This is a school in Australia, and I was interested to talk to one of our business contacts about this, which we didn't end up doing, because there are, within a business, if your business can be associated to, for example, a religion, or even, let's just say, an ideology, it seems that you're able to do some horrific discriminatory things, and the law allows you to do it. I won't even say horrific discriminatory things. I'll say discriminatory. I mean, a classic example is you don't get a female Catholic priest because within the religion, they're male, right? And that's overtly discriminatory, but because of their religious beliefs, it's not discriminatory in the law. They allow it to happen. I'm just trying to think hard as I'm talking about this, Chewy, about one of these religions, one of these examples that may not be religious. They always seem to be because of religious groups and organizations. So here's a story of Newstalk ZB. Obviously, it's an international story, but that's where we found it. Teachers at a controversial Christian school in Brisbane are being asked to sign employment contracts that warn they could be sacked for being openly homosexual. Openly. The City Point Christian College at the heart of yet another scandal after a former teacher lost his job for refusing to sign the document last month. Now, I read further down where this teacher actually talked about why they were, it's quite a long article, why they said that they weren't going to sign it. But basically, here it is here. I think this is the guy. Actually, a guy or girl, not sure. A former City Point teacher who refused to sign the contract told The Guardian that he effectively lost his job due to discrimination. I'm disgusted by this kind of intolerance and discrimination hiding behind the name of God, especially when formalized in a contract. This is not Christianity. Excluding LGBTQIA plus people from the school community perpetuates these archaic values and doesn't prepare students for the real world. In the real world, I love this line so much. In the real world, if you don't share values with a colleague or a friend, you can't contract them out of your life. He's got it. I mean, I don't know what his beliefs are. I don't know whether he's a part of the LGBT community or not, but this guy's got it. Guy or girl's got it. He's like, you can't just literally hide yourself or others in the metaphorical closet to try and protect an ideology that stops once the kids get to the front gate of your property. There's more I want to read, but jump into it.
I mean, it doesn't sound like he should be working at that school anyway.
But isn't that sad? He might be the perfect one to be with these kids. That's the problem.
I mean, part of me wants to go, yeah, cool, dude. You dodged a bullet. Get the hell out of there. That sounds like a nightmare school for bastard people. And then the other half of me is like, if there's a kid at that school that's trying to work out who they are, they're in danger at that school. That's frightening. And this teacher could be someone that was, an ally, or someone that is really important to that kid's continued life on Earth. Yeah. Yikes.
The story explains what the contract is, and this is from the contract, right? I'll read it out to you. We believe, this is what the school is saying, we believe that any form of sexual immorality, and then they put in brackets, including but not limited to adultery, fornication, homosexual acts, bisexual acts, bestiality, incest, pedophilia, and pornography, is sinful and offensive to God, and is destructive to human relationship and society. The college believes that by creating each person, God is divine, and his divine love and wisdom gifted them their gender as male or female. Of course, little addendum there, gender, male or female, is their sex. So they don't even understand what they're talking about, because it's not their male and female is not gender, it's sex. The college therefore acknowledges the biological sex of a person recognized at birth and requires practices consistent with that sex. Now, that intrigues me. So if the school requires practices consistent with being a male, what do they mean? You must play rugby? You must play with trucks? Girls, females, you must play, because they require practices consistent with that sex. Now, what I wanted to bring up, and this is the hypocrisy of these kinds of horse shit locations, is this one here. Because, most of you know, if not all of you know, I certainly have a lot of religion in my background, so I understand quite a bit about it. In that big old dusty book that they're referencing, right? It also, why is masturbation not listed there? I mean, most of these people are a bunch of wankers. I would think that would absolutely be in there. But you see, that might be something that some of the people writing these things may have participated in occasionally. What's that old saying? 95% of people masturbate and the other 5% are liars, something like that.
That's an excellent way to pass the time while you're waiting for public transport. That's all I'm going to say on that.
And let me give you one more thing, right? Because what they're talking about is what they refer to as sin. The Bible is clear, if you believe it, that everyone is a sinner and everyone sins. And actually, it says very clearly, if you look at people with lust in your eyes, you have committed adultery. Why is that not listed? So what they're doing is they're firing people who won't acknowledge that they won't be gay. What about the people who look at people in lustful? That's the same. According to their book, it's the same. But that, of course, they may do that. The people writing this contract may do that. So, I can't be involved in that. But because you're the other, I'm going to get rid of you.
Why is it always these types of Christians that are like, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this? God created you perfectly. Cool. Well, if he's done that and that's how the person's turned out, what are you saying? You don't speak for God.
Well, they said they do.
It's at the end. Well, be wary of anybody that says that they speak for God. At the end of the day, if you take all of this out, what matters is at the end of the road, if they're right, God's going to go, well, you're a bad person, you're a good person. Just leave it at that. Let kids be kids. Let people do what they want to do, as long as they're not hurting anybody else. That's all that matters. I know good Christians who just stay in their own lane, and that's their own way to live their life, and that's absolutely fine. And then there's these types of Christians that are like, I am this better class of person, I am right, and everybody else is doomed to going to hell. That's frightening.
I can't remember the quote. Maybe I should look it up. But there's the old adage of an eye for an eye. And maybe it was Gandhi. I can look it up. Maybe George could look it up while I'm saying it. There was a quote that basically said something like, if you lived in a world where you believed in an eye for an eye, the whole world would end up being blind. So an eye for an eye is going to wipe everybody out. If you constantly poke the bear and say, you can't do this, and this is against the laws of the book I follow, the problem is 90% of what that person's doing in their life is against the laws of the book that they follow. But because they deem the other person's law breaking to be far more serious in their own, they're the other.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with hypocrisy.
If your book says you shouldn't be gay, then you don't be gay. But that's your book. You can't force that on someone else. If someone chooses that, awesome, good for them. But don't force it on other people, and it certainly don't force it on kids. I mean, I found out reasonably recently, as a 41-year-old man, that my dad is Catholic. He's never mentioned it. And it's something that is quietly quite important to him. But as a kid growing up, I was given that choice, and I made my choice, and mum and dad made it very clear that it was my choice to make. I'm endlessly glad of that. Just stop fucking with kids' minds. That's all I want. Just small things.
All right, let's have a look at our last story as we bring George back in. I know I just threw something to you, George, see if you could find it. It doesn't matter if you did or you didn't.
No, you pretty much nailed it on the head.
Right. Yeah. This is a bit of a more of a kind of happy, interesting story. Happy, intriguing, interesting, maybe I'll say. So there is a couple in Australia, right, who own property. It's their dream home. They have quite a big section. I think it's 2 hectares. I'm sure it says it in this article. And what's happened over time, as we find in many parts of the world, like I spent a lot of time in Auckland in my 20s, and I used to spend a lot of time in an area of East Auckland called Howick. And then you drive through all the farmland and you get to Manukau. Now Howick and Manukau are joined by houses. There's no farmland left. Urban sprawl has got there. It's all sold off. It's all, Edward Scissorhands, same coloured houses, same coloured roofs, and it's become one. So there's this part of Australia where that's happened, but there is this family who have their dream home, and they go, we're not selling out to developers. The reason I've been pausing on the story, because I want to show you the photo if you haven't seen it, guys. Have a look at this. There's the family.
I love it.
And they've basically gone, fuck you all. Apparently the story talks about, several years ago, they could have sold it for $5 million. Now their block of land is said to be worth $40 million in this development. And we'll go down and show some of the other photos as how ridiculous this looks. And amongst an urban sea of grey horrificness is this phallic, it's like bloody Shrek's dick pointing into the middle of these houses, going, we're just going to stay here and keep our little bit of land and keep our dream house, and the rest of you can fuck off. I mean, there you go.
I would start planting so many trees. I would live in the middle of a forest.
Yeah. That's what the big green thing kind of like throws me a bit. Like I imagine the water that they use to keep that green. I don't know why. I'd chuck animals and well, I wonder if there's local rules around animals there. But trees and that sort of thing. But like the being surrounded by that regimental greyness would be horrible, right?
So that's their house. Look how lush their lawn is. It's a pretty good looking lawn from down low as well.
The only thing that would make this better, and you absolutely know that he's got a pretty decent lawnmower, but if it was just a push mower, he could start on a Thursday and finish on Sunday afternoon.
It is a bit peculiar. I don't quite understand the lawn. Like I think as we look at it, like literally not a single tree. I mean, are there a couple of bushes there? Yeah. But it looks like literally not a single tree. That goes on to talk about the price of property in America. It makes me think, and I think they talk about in the story, they talk about the castle. They go, oh, Dad, it is kind of like that. It's like there's this Australian thing about having the perfect lawn.
As Gareth
said at modern day, the castle. Yeah, except the difference is his thing wasn't worth very much, and they had to pull it down. But this thing here is said to be worth $40 million now. Although we were kind of questioning that, because they said that it says here, today's valuation is almost unimaginable. The land is worth $40 million plus to local developers who would squeeze 40 new $1 million homes onto the space. Now,
I guess that's what they mean.
If you're selling $41 million homes, you're going to make $40 million. But if the land is worth $40 million, you'll lose. So but let's just say it's worth tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, I think they've extrapolated that 40 million plus to land developers from the fact that the houses would be $41 million houses.
And I guess it's also, I know of some people, and I've heard of this before in America, and I've heard of it happening more around New Zealand, that if you want to sell your house, one of the things you can do is go see your neighbors. You go see your neighbors, and rather than selling like a 600 square meter property, if you can get 4 or 5 or 6 of your neighbors together and end up selling like 10,000 or 15,000 square meters, it doesn't just increase by the number of properties, it can double that as well. So if you have 6 houses, the price doesn't go up by 6-fold, it goes up by like 10 or 12-fold. And it's sort of what this is, because what happens is that bit of land becomes more valuable than the section equivalent beside it that's only the size of a house, because of what you can do with that bit of land. So actually, even though they've been, go fuck yourselves to the things, what they've probably done also is given themselves an investment that if and when they do sell it in a year or 2 or 5 or 10, it'll be worth exponentially what money they would have got for it back in 2012, whenever they were talking about being approached by it. So I just thought that's a nice little story to stick it to the man.
I like it, even though it's some wanker's big phallic piece of wasted water. I do like that it is a big kind of fuck you to the sort of modern conformist subdivision, right? And
you
saw things like this
at their house. It's not like we're fighting for the little guy here. They're obviously not short of acquittal to themselves, but it's still, even though, like, if someone who is comfortable still sticks it to the man who is 1,000 times more comfortable, it still kind of feels nice.
Yeah, this would be an amazing story if it was a 3-bed wooden villa.
Yeah. And they'll still say no to the 40 mil.
No, it's just a crotchety old man going, no, I'm going to make this awkward for everyone. I'll be dead soon.
Like another old man. Brilliant, guys. Lots of fun. Thanks for joining us today. Anything else you want to wrap up with, George? Anything else you want to finish up with, Chewy?
No, all good, mate.
Stay safe out there. I mean, I kind of want to say, if you're in New Zealand, we'll do this one day when people are watching. People are watching now. Where are you from? And we'll get a list of where people are actually watching. Unless you can be quick now. Tell us where you're from. Tell us what part of the country or world you're watching us from. Be interesting to know. But if you are in places where there's still surges going on, be safe out there. It is something that is still happening. It is something that's still real. And I get that, we've got tons of people who recover well from this thing. But I often think about it's not just the risk I'm putting to myself. Look at that, whangarei tauranga Dunedin. It's also para umu. It's also the risk that goes to the next person who get it. Maybe they'll be fine. Then it's the risk that goes to the next person who have it. For me personally, I don't want to be the start of a line that ends up with an elderly person in a rest home getting it and dying from it. I mean, and I know that for most people, we play the odds and it'll be fine. And I get that, but I'm wanting to, look, there's Christchurch as well. I'm wanting to take care, and I want people watching to be safe and healthy. I know that most people catch it. I've just had a message today from someone who I work with who's got it and who's resting up now, and I hope everyone gets well and is well. But still be cautious. It's not over yet. I'm hoping within a couple of weeks we'll be able to say, tail end. But today it's not over, and just everyone take care of yourselves, yeah?
Yep.
All right. Lovely. Shall we want you back tomorrow, yeah?
Yeah, man. I'll be here.
Sounds good. All right, team. And at the last minute, always good. Thanks for joining us again today. Remember, share our shit. The YouTube channel is scrolling along down the bottom. It's a good place to either follow along, subscribe at the YouTube channel. Also follow me personally on Twitter, because all the clips that we make I release on both of those places as well. Thank you, George, as always, sir, for all your beautiful work. You go to bed now and rest up and feel better for tomorrow. Hopefully we'll see you then. And Chewy, thanks for joining us again. We'll catch up with you tomorrow. And until then, hooroo to everybody else. See you guys.